have Barnes Courtney with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, dude, thanks for having me.
Singer, songwriter, excellent performer. I really, really enjoy your performances, by the way. They're really, really energetic. So how would you, I have my own comparisons, but how would you describe your sound?
I think the YouTube comment section is a lot better at describing who I'm ripping off than I am.
I see.
I always worry that, oh God, is it too MGMT or is it too Jack White? And then I'll look in the comments and it's always, they'll be like, this guy's ripping off Kings of Leon. I think, the great thing about making music is that you try and copy your idols and you almost always fail and end up somewhere completely different.
Yeah.
And then if you stumble for long enough and you're lucky, you can end up somewhere that is somewhat unique to your own sound. So I'm still working on that. I'm still trying to find my voice and something that I can really say is as exciting to me as my heroes. It's like someone like David Bowie, or the Rolling Stones or the Arctic Monkeys. But in terms of Fire specifically, I mean, I was trying to recreate Kanye West's Black Skinhead, and it just failed miserably. But if you listen,
Fire?
Yeah, with Fire, if you pick it apart, you can actually see all the touch points where I was trying to rip it off. Like,
then it's a really good ripoff.
It was a beautiful stumbling of failure. Because from him, I love the way he used all the percussive breaths. I love his use of that old sort of like bluesy stacked vocals. The big like bombastic drums. And I was trying to do that. I was like, wow, he's taken like a pinch of rock music and like put it into hip hop.
How do you think that your music has changed in roughly 5 years?
I was kind of bored of myself. So I came up with this fictitious story about a cult leader in a post-apocalyptic world ruined by climate change, who was raised by very strict religious parents where everything was a sin. And he sort of creates this cult based on libertarianism and hedonism, and purports himself to have magical powers, whereas he's actually just a normal man selling snake oil. And the entirety of the cult's message is secretly just a means that he uses for his own seedy gains.
Wow.
And that made it much more entertaining for me to write again. I was like, wow, this is really interesting now.
Does that have anything to do with your own life?
I didn't think it did. But they do say, don't they, that every writer is ultimately just writing about themselves. Yeah. And I realized, I guess my career affords me the ability to follow the rabbit hole of hedonism to like the most insane depths without immediate consequence. I remember I was like sitting on the sofa in a robe, having been playing video games for a month solid, eating cake off my chest and like smoking a cigarette. My guitar player came in and went, "You are not doing well." There's no one's coming to say like, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, get back to work." And I realized that, God, even though I dreamed of being able to do whatever I wanted as a child, pleasure becomes pain so quickly if left unchecked. Like, our lizard brains don't know what's good for us. So I think, that was woven in there. Because at the end of this whole debacle, the cult leader, who's painting his skin white so that he looks different to the other desert dwellers, with mercury-based paint, which ultimately drives him mad, decides that for a cult leader, death is the ultimate pleasure, to want for nothing and be wanted by all.
You came out with 2 singles this year. One is National Treasure, the other one is Villains, which is a collaborative effort. Both really good songs, very intense. Your music is your songwriting, the way it sounds, very intense, very big, even if it's not loud. And a theme is like tumultuous relationships, overcoming adversity. Do you feel like you experience those things the most and that's why you write about it, or that those things are just the most inspiring to you?
I think that for me, trials and tribulations and turmoil are particularly intense, and that the catharsis that I receive from writing music during those times is immense. Yeah. I think I can be lazy and without being pushed hard to my guitar and to my writing desk, by those horrible emotions. I might not have the self-discipline yet
Yeah.
to write. And I was reminded by that recently. I had my heart broken really badly, and I sat and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and I realized, like, it's not the heartbreak that delivered the good songs. It was the effort over the course of like several weeks until I felt better, being sat there day after day after day, fishing, dipping my hook in the water again and again until eventually something good came out. But most of it was crap.
Oh wow. So like you were really mining for like deep feelings for a long time.
I think I was just trying to escape,
Yeah.
and I think that's why the greatest musicians among us, like the Amy Winehouses and the Kurt Cobains, like they're people who are just deeply, deeply troubled, and that's why so many musicians die so young, I believe, from drug overdoses. Is because some of them who are deeply disturbed learn how to exercise those demons through music, and they also numb them with drugs.
Yes.
I could probably do with being a bit more fucked up.
Maybe that would help a little bit.
For my art. But I like to imagine that there's also a path to making art without being in pain. Perhaps if I could cultivate more self-discipline, sit down every day. Stephen Pressfield in his book, The War of Art, talks about preparing yourself for the muse. How it's not up to you to decide when she comes, but if you're in a bar or at a party, her whispers are subtle and you won't hear her. So sit down every day, he says, for 6 hours like I do. And
that is so difficult. That is so difficult to do, to be disciplined with art, which is something that is so kind of undisciplined, right? It's something that comes very naturally.
That's his point, is that, the only part we have control over is making sure the door's open and the rug is swept so the muse won't soil her gown and the fireplace is lit so it's inviting, we create the environment, and then she decides when she emerges. And you shouldn't feel bad, if you leave your 6-hour session with a sentence or a paragraph or nothing at all, because you did your bit. And one of these days she'll be passing by, in her chariot or her rocket ship or whatever she travels on, and she'll see this sort of, sad man or woman hunched over their desk and think, I'm gonna go visit that guy.
So what's your songwriting process? Do you write the lyrics first, or do you have a beat first or a riff first, and you kind of find it that way?
Tends to be melodies mostly. I used to get like constant invasions into my mind, like to wake up in the middle of the night with melodies.
Yeah.
As I got older, that seemed to have calmed down. So I don't know if my creativity has like moved into a different space. I mean, I do find that the moment I think that I've nailed it and I'm like, oh, this is the way that I create, the door moves to a different place, So I just try to be very humble and open to all different possibilities.
What has been your favorite performance to date?
I should keep a diary, because I think part of what makes the road so great is that it can force you into the present quite a lot, because it's in such a whirlwind of activity, and you don't always remember. But there was one show in San Francisco when I was supporting the Wombats, and I remember this woman came into my dressing room who worked there in this maze of underground tunnels and different dressing rooms. It was an old theater, like over 100 years old, where we were playing. And she offered to give me a blessing. And I've had a million like LA chicks say like, I'm gonna give you a blessing. And I'm like,
you have?
bullshit. Yeah.
Is that a normal thing?
Oh, there are so many like hippie, like I'm a witch, like chicks in LA. Especially around Silver Lake, Yeah, there's millions of them. So I said, I agreed to be polite. And this woman took me into the side room, and she like got her sage out, whatever they do, and I've seen that before. And for whatever reason, I just felt this profound sense of calm, and I felt as though someone had poured a jug of warm water over my head, and as if it was all running down my body, and I felt all my anxieties wash away with it. I was just overwhelmed because I was so taken aback that I actually felt anything, and especially so profoundly as this. And I looked at her in the eyes, and she looked at me and said, your purpose on this earth is to do your best to bring people joy.
Wow.
And I'd never thought about my performances like that before. I'd always felt, especially as a support band, you know, on that tour, like I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna show them how cool I am, you know, I fucking show them why they should pay attention to me, leaning up against the barrier, waiting for the main band to come out, you know?
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna fight and get my music out there, and I'm gonna show them that I'm somebody and I got something to say. And I thought, oh, just try and make them happy.
So did that change the way that you performed or the way that you thought of your performing, like from that point on?
Well, I went out that night, and I mean, from a technical standpoint, the gig was just awful. I mean, it was probably one of the longest unchecked moments of feedback, you know, from the speakers I've ever experienced, like really, really bad technical issues. And there was something about like my heart opening up from that experience and the connection. I mean, I just had the most beautiful, authentic connection with the audience. And I was talking to them like an old friend, and we were laughing and like joking around, and it was just a lark, you know. And I remember getting into the van and before we had the tour bus, and seeing the city just disappear into this tiny, like twinkling light, and feeling so profoundly happy and grateful to be on this like rolling pirate ship, you know, all my best friends. So I think for that reason, I would say that's one of the best, even though the actual gig itself was probably one of the worst.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So The Cure versus the Smiths.
Oh, I've always been more of a Cure guy, to be honest. I mean, I love the Smiths' lyricism, but I think the Cure's like musical breadth is much wider and more diverse across their records.
Depeche Mode versus New Order.
Oh, I mean, God, I can't really choose between those two.
Tool versus Deftones.
Oh, Deftones for me, like immediately.
Yeah.
I feel almost inept saying this, but I've never been able to get into Tool, and I like know that they're really important and they do really amazing things, and that I would be lucky to sort of like touch their gown upon Mount Immortality, but like I find it very hard going.
Nirvana versus Pearl Jam.
Oh, it's immediately Nirvana. I don't know, I just feel more authenticity from Nirvana. And also when I first moved away from Seattle, where I spent the ages of 4 to 14, and to Ipswich, like Nirvana was one of the few like rock CDs that my dad had. He had a ton of vinyl, but like he only had Nevermind on the CD player, and that was like my single link back home when I was homesick, like listening to that record again and again. And I used to walk past this little pub called the Railway Tavern around the time that like Lithium came on the CD, and it like imagine myself like, imagine how I could play at that pub. Like,
it's very cool.
So it's very close to my heart.
Alice in Chains versus Soundgarden.
Oh man, that's a tough decision. Oh, they're both so good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with Alice in Chains.
Fugees versus The Roots.
I think The Roots are just cooler.
Okay, well, what song are you going to be performing for us today?
Like maybe Sinners off the first album. I'll see if there's anything else that I can conjure up, but it might have to be something way in the baritone.
Okay, so a surprise. We'll see.
You can hear from my voice. But yeah, we shall see.
Okay, sweet. All right.